Okay, officially good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I think we are from all over the place. Even though today was an awkward day for those in Midwest, in the middle of the morning. Oh, I don't know exactly what time, right around noon. It was dark outside. I saw some pictures from Ohio and it was quite phenomenal. I'm super excited about the eclipse. I've been talking about this like a maniac. Um, but this is another reason why we're here today. We are here today to hear from Michelle and Stefan about career and leadership. For the past year, Echoes has been navigating this idea of a new design paradigm. I think there's so many changes happening, and we are in an amazing moment in life where we can also define the future of design, considering all of the crazy things that we've seen for the past 4 years, with like supersized teams to no teams at all. So I want to know everyone's perspectives of that. Has anything like that happened to you in your career? Is that the reason you're here today? I will give you both, Stefan and Michelle, some time for you to introduce yourselves, but just so we can give a little bit of context on why we're here today. We are here because of Echoes. We try to host a couple of these free webinars every year when we are about to launch a design leadership program. And it's part of our mission to educate and create the next generations and the future of design all over the world. This is Juliana. She's the founder of Echoes. She's now in Brazil, but she was in Australia for a while. Echoes in Brazil, at least, evangelize the concept of design thinking. So it's quite interesting. And we truly believe in creating and designing our most desirable future. And I'm just accepting a couple people in. So if I'm double multitasking, please give me some time. So here we are. We are at school, and that's the reason why we have design leadership and the reason why we're here today. We are also a design lab. We work with multiple companies and projects from all over the world. I'm gonna give you a little quick overlook about them. And we also have some ventures, some of them quite exciting, especially for us who live in the coastal geography. Echoes is part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance, and we're quite proud to say that we are the only independent lab among all of these institutions doing research on design, so it's quite an honor. At this point, with about 12 years of existence, we've had around 200 projects, and in terms of our school, we taught around 50,000 people globally. Only with design leadership, we're around 300 people in only 4 years. I'm quite excited about that. Those are some of the companies we've worked together, some big names, some smaller names, and local names, considering Brazil and APAC. And some of our companies, for those in Sydney or in Australia, you might know WorkSafe. We did this project with them, envisioning the future of security in 2049. It's quite interesting, so aligned with our mission of designing the future of design and more desirable futures. We are also an accelerator. We have a couple of projects. One of the ones that we've been working for the past 3 years, I believe it's Google News Initiative, quite exciting. We just wrapped up a project in Brazil. We also did the same in APAC. We work with big names such as Faber-Castell, so talking about creativity. And some of our ventures.
Interrupt you. I don't think I can see the data you're sharing.
You can? Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for letting me know. Because otherwise you're just looking at my face and that's not as exciting. Thank you. I believe now you can. There you go. And this is one of our ventures. Futuroca is a project spearheaded by Juliana, talking about education for children. And the other one that I've mentioned before, it's the Surf Evolution. It's quite interesting. It's like a gym for you to acquire very specific skills for surfing. So we've been a little bit all over the place, but everything we do is through design. Everything we do is through innovation. And that same goes with design leadership. And the reason why we're here is an exclusive program for design and innovation leaders. And I would like to talk about the lineup. not to mention Michelle and Stefan who are here. We also have some other amazing people doing great, very interesting things in the world. We're talking about Eric Quinn from 3M, Ezio Manzini, Politecnico di Milano, talking about social innovation and environment. Leslie Ann talking about inclusivity and ethics in design. If you want to know more about them, please take a look at our website. Otherwise, we can also have a one-on-one session. I can go through everything that we're gonna cover during this program. But I don't want to take much of our time. Again, if you have any questions, we'll be able to have a one-on-one conversation about this. Otherwise, the website, it's very easy to navigate. Those are the pillars of design leadership per our understanding. So we're talking about articulating the value of design. We're talking about shaping and managing teams. I think a lot of that conversation is going to fall under here today. So a lot about understanding yourself and where you want to go with your career path. So it's also a little bit of the conversation we're going to have today. And it's also a matter of excelling in design until the last mile, keeping your team engaged, aligned, and creative. Classes are going to start on the 9th of September, so we still have some time for enrollment. Classes usually happen in 2 moments during the week, usually Mondays or Tuesdays if you are in APAC, or Wednesdays or Thursdays if you are in APAC. But I don't want to take much of our time, and I really want to talk about career leadership. This is a topic that it's actually quite relevant to me at the moment, and I think for some of us here as well. And before we get there, I really want to talk about why this conversation is even relevant. I think there's a lot making us feel scared right now in the moment as designers. And we're talking about creativity. What's gonna be live with AI? Are we gonna have no jobs at all? And what's going on in tech companies? Is it because of AI, and is it because of all of the layoffs that UX, UI is no longer relevant? I think there's this buzzword or coming from an article that we read and Juliana wrote about a few weeks ago, which is the design freak out. Everybody's freaking out about design. Where are we? Where are we going with design? How are we changing? How are we having people understand that design can be a strategic tool? The design can be an innovation tool. And this is what I want to talk about today, giving us some context, understanding that this is not real, and how we can keep design relevant. So please, for those here, I have a quick question here for you. Why do you think and how you see design as a strategic tool? I would love to hear your perspective. Please drop some of your answers in the chat. And while you were thinking, I also want to have the opportunity for Michelle and Stefan to introduce yourselves. Go as you want. Let's get this started.
All right.
Go for it.
Sure. I'm Michelle. Apparently, I have to do the glasses thing to introduce myself. Not joking. I'm Michelle. I've been working with design for over 20 years. I come from Brazil originally, but I live here in Sydney. And this is not Sydney. This is an office, but I live in Sydney. I work for Atlassian. I've been working with them for almost 5 years now. Before that, I was with Shopify, and before that, with Booking.com. Worked all over the world. This is the 5th country, so it's very exciting. And also I'm part of the Design Leadership Echo School program for design leaders, which I'm very happy to participate in. Look, I work in one of the products that you either love or hate, which is Jira, and I love that. I think it's a great experience to work on that. Stefan?
My name is Stefan Willemse. So as you may tell from my accent, I'm not originally from New Zealand. I am now a Kiwi living in Wellington, but I'm originally from Cape Town in South Africa. I am the head of strategy, or the strategy director for Digital Arts Network in New Zealand. So that's basically an experience design and innovation studio that sits within the larger TBWA, which is a global sort of brand and comms organization. It's a creative collective, I think maybe 200 offices or so around the world. And then I also work inside another unit called Next, which is really an innovation and emerging technologies and future trends unit that serves as an internal consulting unit for the TBWA network. So we look at the future of brand experiences, futures design, cultural trends, cultural intelligence, etc.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. Your time is highly appreciated. I would like to just give everyone who's here and those who are going to listen to us later a little bit of a spoiler about your workshop coming up. So don't say too much, it's just a spoiler. We don't want to tell the whole story, but I would love to just get everyone excited about what you have planned.
You start this round, Stefan. Come on.
So mine is on progressive futures. So what that really is taking everyone through a layered approach, future stack that I call it, that I use for thinking about and creating progressive futures, positive futures, disruptive futures for organizations. So we look at a few different layers that goes all the way from kind of world building all the way through to, products of the future, if you will, to see how we can bring that to life. We have a couple of pit stops along the way, sort of big picture thinking, the history of the planet, the future of the planet, and why we're in such an inflection point in our history, really.
Nice. I want to watch that. So mine is on design systems and using design systems to accelerate the design culture in your company. And how do we do that on a large scale? Yeah, that's the idea. I don't want to tell too much.
I love that. We only need to have everyone excited, but they don't need to know all of the details because it's VIP only. All right. So let's just start having this conversation by defining first, and what do we see as the difference between traditional leadership and design leadership? Is that a difference, and what it is in your perspective?
Michelle, why don't you go? We'll alternate like that. We'll ping.
Yeah, we'll alternate, right? I think it's smart. Look, I see there's a difference. And I think there's a difference between company to company. I think there's a difference between just design leadership and traditional leadership. It's not defined here, but traditional leadership is usually people leadership, people management almost, right? And then it becomes more of a, are you taking care of the people? How are you doing that part of it? And I think design leadership has more of a role of what Stefan was saying, leading us into futures, right? Thinking about potential goals, creating that strategy, trying to create ways to achieve that strategy, which is not really the normal people manager role, right? So you have a little, almost like you have to wear lots of hats is what I say to people. You have to know how to do the people side of things. You have to know how to do the design side of things. And you also have to know how to do the business side of things. So the way I usually talk to people, especially mentees that ask about how to become a leader or what is expected from me, is you're a good translator. You talk business, you talk dev, you talk design, you understand everything, and you're this conduit that you can get all this information out. Again, that's my expectation, Stefan. Also, I would say that's as an internal person. Like I work inside a company, right? Inside big companies. Your experience is from an agency side, so I would imagine it's slightly different.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point. I really struggled with this one, Luna, when you sent this through. I was like, what is the difference? It's one of the good things about these chats is it makes me think about things as well. What is the difference between design leadership and traditional leadership? And I think, yeah, to your point, Michelle, like my journey has been quite different. It's been quite a roundabout journey, if I put it that way, right? It hasn't been a case of studying design in university and then working in product design or experience design, etc., inside a large organization. So, I just have to preamble everything that I'm saying through. This is just my subjective perspective, right? And my own experience. I think there's an interesting thing around design leadership versus design-minded leadership. And so I think design leadership is the way that someone who's an expert in design rises into those positions in an organization, right? Organizations are, unfortunately, still majority hierarchical, multi-layered, like an army, right? Everyone reports up, and it turns into a ladder. That's unfortunately the way things still are. There's a great book called Reinventing Organizations, which talks a little bit about that. But within that, I would imagine the design leadership is as you get better at being a designer, you get promoted, and you get more into people leadership, and you become the voice of design in the executive places, right? In the leadership places. That to me is design leadership. I think the place where I found myself is to be more of a design-minded leader, right? So I mean by design-minded, it's leading with a design mindset when we're talking about empathy and we're talking about curiosity, we're talking about multiple viewpoints, doing things iteratively, testing, learning, etc. That to me is a design-minded leadership. And I think that's a little different, or actually fundamentally quite different from the traditional leadership, which is more about a group of senior people coming together, articulating a point of view, and then presenting it as this is the roadmap, and this is the milestones, this is how we're going to budget it, and this is how everyone is going to, fulfill this plan that we've come up with. So I do find it, that's an oversimplification of traditional leadership, but I do find that there's a bit of a difference there, I think.
And to add to that, before we move from this one, interestingly enough, depending on the company you're in, so if you were like an insider like me, you will see right away if the company believes in design or not, if they do have design leaders, right? So I worked in companies before, I'm not going to name names, where a designer was reporting to a dev manager or to a product manager, right? So if you're looking at the structure of work, which, as you described, may look like an army structure, but if you're looking at that structure of work, and you're reporting up to product, then you're thinking like, how is design really playing a role in here, right? And if you're reporting to dev, same idea. How am I playing a role in here as a designer if we don't have that seat at the table at the highest level, right? So I think it helps from inside if you have an ability to talk to someone that works in a company, like, oh, I'm interested in Atlassian, right? Ask them, is it really a design-minded company? Do they really have someone up at that top level that is a design-centric, person that you're going to be able to report to? Because I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And then just to build on that, so you have companies like ANZ, for example, in Australia, that until very recently had Ophir Yomtov, right, as their chief design officer. So then that gives you the idea, right? Well, design serves all parts of the business, as opposed to your point. You go somewhere else and it sits under marketing, or it sits under product, or it sits under engineering, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, 100%.
I love this conversation, and I don't know if I can add to that question, which is, okay, I love what you said, Stefan, because I think there's a huge difference between only a design leadership, which is how you said, we just are going higher and higher and higher up at being a designer, being an expert matter. But how about having that mindset, but also in other, if you're coming from different backgrounds, maybe you're not coming from a graphic design background, but you can also have that mentality. But I think that shows a lot about you as a person, but also the flexibility probably that your company had in terms of maturity in design and in human centricity, in order for you to be able to lead through the perspective of design, even if it's like traditional leadership and not necessarily design leadership. Is that something, do you see designers become that, or be in that position, even if they don't come from that background, mainly by having that mentality? Is my question making sense?
I think so. And I was just gonna jump in. I'm sorry, Stefan. I know she was talking about the side that the way that you answered it, but it reminded me of there's a book called Reimagining Design by Kevin Bethune. Really nice book. It's on the bookshelf somewhere. I interviewed him about this, and I talked to him about this on the podcast. And the really interesting thing for me is he didn't come from a design background, right? And I think that that's what is interesting. Like, it's a company like Nike in his case, allowing someone, or not even allowing, because that's the wrong word, right? Supporting someone that didn't come from a design background to become a design leader, right? And to show that from his business perspective, he was leading with a design mindset, right? And then him noticing that and then growing towards a designer in the future, I think was an interesting experience.
And I think we're already getting there now with the second question, or the second topic, which is, okay, so if that is possible, both options, either by being a designer and getting higher up and becoming a design leader, or leading through the perspective of design, both are similar. Not necessarily you're doing the same, but I think it's also important for those who are here, and also for ourselves, to maybe define or understand what are some of those characteristics that might be important. I think if you're talking about a design leader from the perspective that you mentioned, which is, we're getting up in the hierarchy and we're becoming the leader, I think we kind of get an idea of what that entails, meaning a lot of very specific expertise. But if we're talking about design leadership as we see it through the lenses of our program, for instance, what are those characteristics for you to be an efficient design leader through the perspective of design? Who wants to go first?
Is it, I'll just go for it, and then you jump in there, Michelle.
Go ahead.
Again, this is quite an interesting question, the characteristics of a design leader. I think it's quite difficult to just articulate or just kind of list a bunch of characteristics that are what a design leader should have, because every person, as we know, is unique, and you have your own strengths that you bring to your role. So the characteristics of a design leader are whatever your strengths are, right? Those are the characteristics of a design leader. The fact that you are working in a design leadership position, I think is got very little to do with it. It's more got to do with what are you bringing to the role that's going to make you different, and what's going to make you relevant and valuable and useful to the organization that you're in, and to the mission that you're trying to fulfill in that organization or in another one. So I think it's quite hard to go like, oh, there's a tick box. Those some of those overused adjectives that we see all the time with design, which are true, empathy, curiosity, testing, prototyping, empathy, etc. Those things are all important, but they're important for any kind of human to have. It's not really an exclusive design thing. It's not an exclusive leadership thing. I think those are just things to be a good human. I can say for me, what I think is what I've appreciated in the design leaders that I've worked with and the leaders that I've worked with in general has been curiosity. I think curiosity has been something that I've found has been really exciting for me to work with and inspiring for me to work with. People that go, oh, I don't know why that is, right? That's the humility to go, I don't know why that is. Oh, but I'd like to find out. And that's the curiosity bit. That to me has been a characteristic that I've really appreciated in some of the design leaders that I've worked with.
I want to echo that, but I also want to say it's hard not to want to list characteristics. I completely agree, right? It's going to be depending on which company you're in, who you're talking about, right? So it's always going to be about the person, right? We were talking in the beginning about kids. We have kids, me and Stefan, not together. We're just talking about kids. And so my child is autistic, and this for me is one of those, like, it's a spectrum, right? Design leadership is a spectrum. The same way that design is a spectrum. You might be a designer who is a specialist in prototyping, who understands graphic design, who knows this bit, right? So there's all these things that you are good at and maybe okay at and maybe amazing at. So it's a variation, right? And what I notice is there are a couple of those that I fluctuate towards. There's a couple of design leaders that I feel more aligned with, and there are a couple that I feel less aligned with. So there are design leaders that are extremely analytical and great at the planning side of things and great at that vision piece at the end, for instance, right? They can see the future, they can see the end goal, and they can describe the milestones and the goals and how to drive the team there. There are other design leaders that are more about how do we build the right team? How do we make sure that Stefan has the right project for him that fits his skills, that he will be satisfied, but also the business will be satisfied, right? And they can see that, they can see how to, unwind all of that. My favorite ones are the good communicator, good empathy person, someone that after a big change in the company, which just happened this month in my business, this person, is not even on my org anymore. And she's like, hey, how's everyone doing? How are you doing? How are you feeling this week? And I don't even work with that person anymore. And I feel like so seen and so happy that to have that design leader in my group that will send me a message, 3 weeks later, just to be sure I'm okay. How did the move go? You just moved. And you're like, how did you have time in your day to ask me about the move? But that's the kind of design leader that usually shocks me and that just makes me go like, I want to work with you,
If I can just say something, that not necessarily to make a good design leader, but a characteristic that I've noticed by working with design leaders for the past 4 years is humility. And in a way, exactly what you're saying now. I haven't found one that I'm like, I need to talk to you about this, this, and that, and they don't find the time to understand what I need and listen. And I think that probably shows something about design leaders in general. And I'm talking about people that I know that have no time, and people that are quite important to how we consume and do things in our society now. So yeah, I think humility might probably be one of those characteristics that we should probably work on if you want to become a design leader. But now I want to know a little bit more about you individually. And we are talking about personal growth, so I think people will also get inspired by this. Like, you have a trajectory, you are here now, but you have had a life, right? And I want to know, when you started, what were the skills that you already had, right? That you believe that was the reason why you maybe got your first job or your first leadership role. And which ones were the skills that by working or by reflecting another leader or another colleague, you were like, okay, I need to acquire this and that skill in order for me to become that leader or to get that promotion or to change my career in whatever direction. So that's an individual question to each of you.
What skills did you have when you started is such a difficult one for me, because I think I didn't even come from design. I studied marketing and advertising, right? So for me, it was, I knew graphic design, I knew art direction, basically, is what I knew, right? So I knew how to make the pixels on the screen. That was the skills. That's literally, the design side of things, right? I could put the colors, I could tell you why this font, I could tell you like how to make a good branding guide. What I had to build was all the other stuff, right? How to communicate, how do I sell this? What actually explains to a client? So the thing that was the same for advertising and design was, everyone has a problem with clients. Clients are always the bane of the existence, because you're like, but I made it perfect. It has all the right things. But you have to convince the client, right? And I think that the first skill for me was, how do I talk to the client? How do I understand them? And I realized it wasn't me selling them. It wasn't me trying to give them the perfect thing. It was me listening to them. And I think that was the first big skill as a design leader, is like, can you listen to the client and understand why they want what they want and how to get them what they want so they're happy and you're giving them a good job and you're giving them a good thing. And that only keeps, it keeps evolving, that same listening, right? It keeps growing. It doesn't matter if you're in a company, in an agency, but I was in agencies in the beginning. So that skill really felt like, to me, had to be one of the first ones where I was like, I know design, you should believe me. And then it's like, no. It's their product. It's their thing. I need to make it for them.
I think that's a fantastic point, and I absolutely agree with you. The skills that I started with my career. So I think just a little bit of context about my own career is that I never studied design formally. And also I haven't really had a career, sort of in brackets. It's kind of moved about all over the place. Just a quick overview is, I guess I started working in kitchens. So I was a chef first in London, the Troubadour Cafe in Earls Court, and then I went into teaching and I became a kindergarten teacher, and I did that in Asia and then in Spain, and then moved into history teaching, high school. And after that, got into copywriting and creative, and then project management, and then account management, and then strategic planning, brand strategy, and then experience strategy, and then kind of experience design, and now finally kind of strategy, innovation, methodologies, etc. So it has been a very roundabout way, is what I'm saying, in a very sort of long-winded way. So where I started was, and I was thinking about this the other day, is what relevance does, working in a kitchen in London have to do with being a design leader, or teaching kids in a kindergarten in Taiwan? What has that got to do with design leadership? Or a bunch of very rowdy teenagers in a high school history class in South Africa? What's the connection? But the truth is that even though you don't realize it, and even though these things seem like they're completely disconnected from each other, there are skills and ways of doing things that you pick up as you move along that you don't realize while you're busy doing it. And then you find yourself later in life and you go, oh, That's what it was for. That ability to stand up in front of a bunch of people and to talk about something and to get them interested in what you're saying and excited in their contribution. And like you've mentioned, you know, they're hearing their voices, acknowledging where they're from, understanding their context. These are all things that you pick up, maybe doing something completely different. And then you then apply that to your leadership role, right? There's not such a big difference between a high school history class in Cape Town, in an underprivileged neighborhood, and a boardroom in somewhere in Asia Pacific. To be honest with you, characters are similar, the kind of people, the kind of things that you have to deal with, it's all very, very similar. Things like the joy and the play that children have, the creativity that they have, is something that you can pick up, and you can apply that to your own work, and you can apply that to groups and to innovation, to workshops, etc. So I guess in a long-winded way, I'm saying, I didn't know that there were skills that I came into a design career with, but you sort of pick them up along the way and they make sense. And sometimes if you're lucky, I think it just clicks and those layers line up and you go, oh, wow, I didn't know I know how to do this thing. And now that I've lined them all up, they've layered and automatically something has happened and I have this skill. Yeah, I think that's the crux of it. Hey, I've just seen that there's a thing that popped up on my screen here that there's going to be some auto update in 1 minute. If I do disappear, I will log back in with my phone.
Thank you for letting us know.
Fun times. Actually, I was going to add something to that. I don't know if you... So, Stefan, it's really funny. The way you said that made me think also, like, there's this famous story, which none of us can tell if it's true or not, but it's a famous story from Steve Jobs, that the reason we have good typography on Mac is that he studied typography for 1 semester in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this random thing where he studied it for 1 semester, he enjoyed it, and then when they were making the first Mac, he's like, the fonts need to be good. And it needs to be like these professionally made fonts. And that's the only reason why we got like Garamond and we got, you know, the original fonts that the Mac came with, right? Which no one knew at the time. That's why we would get this, right? So we don't know why we're learning things. We learn things throughout. Our life is these collections of experiences that we don't understand. And it's really easy when you're looking backwards, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking backwards, it's much easier to say like, oh, that's why I learned marketing and advertising. That's why you went to, you know, be a teacher somewhere, because you needed some of that skill that you didn't see at the time, I guess.
100%. And I think that's the key takeout as well, is you have to dig into, why does that thing appeal to me? Now that I've chosen this thing and I've decided I'm going to be a teacher for a little bit, why? Why do I enjoy it? And I found out through that it's the interaction with creative minds is the part that I like. The part I didn't like was the beige staff rooms. But you know, there's always a reason underneath. It's kind of like don't want to sound too out there, but your soul is kind of drawn to stuff, right? And it's not always as obvious what it is, but there's some magnetism towards some things. And if you dig into it, you might uncover a deeper reason why that is interesting to you, why you're passionate about it. And I think identifying that is something that you can then carry with you when you're on your way towards lining up or stacking up your sort of your career, I guess, or your leadership or your mission.
Well, first of all, this gives me so much hope, like different than Michelle. And like you, I don't have a background in graphic design. I studied strategic design later in my life. But then, not to be naive, because I know that some design leadership positions require you to have a very specific skills in design, like as I don't want to say basic design because it's a terrible way of defining it, but design as we understand, the majority of us understand. But I feel like what you both are saying in a way is also that it is so important to, yes, think of our soft skills, which will in a way inform and talk about our passions and the thing that we could potentially be good at. So I also want to make sure that we keep reinforcing the fact that soft skills are extremely important, especially now with the rise of AI. Some of those soft skills might be very important, not only to train it and collaborate with it, but also to secure ourselves as unique individuals and professionals.
And that's the perfect point. The perfect point to discuss when you're talking about AI is it doesn't have any lived experience, right? It only has data inputs, right? And what you're doing to yourself when you're getting that lived experience is you're getting all these data inputs yourself, right? So you're getting different information from different areas, from different perspectives. You're opening yourself up to perspectives to have these different conversations, right? So the fact that, again, Stefan worked in a kitchen, right? He experienced something from that kitchen, maybe the stress level, maybe the precision, maybe something that he needed, right? To be able to do the work. The fact that I had to work in different countries and I had to learn different languages and I had to talk to different people, right? That can help me in some way. So it's all about how did that collective experience gets into you. And even if you're doing a mentorship or if you're talking to someone, can you get some of that from Stefan or from Michelle to also embed into yourself? So it's a lot of that shared experience that I think is what's helpful.
I really love what you're saying, and it's impossible not to get deep on this, but I really think that our lives guide us in the ways that that if we're aware of, could literally set us to be unique and make an impact in whatever work we are doing. And I still want to know more about your journey, because I think that's the best way is telling a story to get everyone here to also understand what are the ways that they can get to that position or change their career in whatever way possible. And I think this is a very similar question than the one before, but we were talking about specific skills, and I wonder if there is any difference for you in answering this question here in particular. Did you have to evolve in any way, maybe as a human or as a person? Was there anything in particular that you need to overcome in order for you to become a leader? Because it's a lot about having that empathy, dealing with people, dealing with emotions a lot of the time and expectations. So as a human, and since we're talking about soft skills, was there anything in particular that you could maybe put a finger on and be like, okay, I had to evolve in this particular area? And we don't need to get everybody emotional, but please.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think just before I answer that question, they're sort of connected, but Sue was asking, how did you manage to position yourself to be able to pivot from one area to the other? Any tips around how to express experience when the market is now looking for super specific skills? Yeah, so I think they're sort of connected to each other. I think in terms of evolving as a leader and evolving as sort of a hard and soft skills, those are not completely the wrong terms, but sort of more people-centered and more kind of executional skills or delivery skills. In terms of the delivery skills, I think that was really just born by an insatiable curiosity that whenever I found myself in a new place, right? So let's say I was teaching English literature in high school, and then when I've had enough of this, and I found a friend who had a startup and they were looking for someone to write content for the web. This was 15, 20 years ago. So I'll give it a shot. So before kids, so I could still move careers quite easily. I'll give it a shot. And then when I arrived at this startup company with 8 people on a farm outside Cape Town, where we were kind of, trying to live off grid and growing beards, we decided that, I found that there was other things that could be done there. I could do the content writing, but there was also a need for SEO. So I found out about that. And then I found out there was also a need for social media strategies. So I found out about that. And I guess that just kept on going, right? So it was this idea that when you arrive somewhere new, it's going to be uncomfortable. The best way to do it is to connect with people that can show you how it's done, reach out, have the kind of courage to get in touch with people that know about it, and read as much as you can. Read short form, read online, but read books, listen to podcasts like Michelle's, find out from others who have done it successfully, and just get as much information as you can, which you can then turn into knowledge. I think that's the hard skill bit. And that's kind of led me all the way through my career, right? That's kind of gone from there into design and into tech and into innovation and emerging tech and futures, all that stuff. It's all just been interesting stuff that happens on the periphery. There's a guy called Tim Minchin, you probably know, an Australian musician with the red hair, great songwriter, musician. He did an acceptance speech for an honorary doctorate he got from University of WA. You can find it on YouTube. I watch it about once a year, but he talks about some people who have this thing that when they're young, they know exactly what they want to be, right? When my mom was 17 years old, she didn't come from a privileged background. She did well at school. They said, "You've won a bursary. What would you like to do?" And she said, "I'm going to go study medicine, and then I'm going to go and help poor people in Central Africa." And then, 20 years later, she did exactly that. And that's where I grew up. So she had this vision about what she wanted to be. That was her skill set. For someone like me, that hasn't been possible. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, what do you want to be? It would be something completely different. I've wanted to be a war photographer and a journalist for Rolling Stone and a free surfer, although my surfing is really shit, and a musician, although I can only play 4 chords, and, all these things, an architect and whatever it may be. And so I've kind of moved around, but I've tried to keep an eye, and this is what Tim Minchin talks about, on the things happening in the periphery. And so those are the hard skills that you pick up. In terms of the soft skills, to me, it's like what happens when you take the hard skills, you put it in a new position, and you add people experience. And when you add experience and you add time in the saddle, then that information and that knowledge that you've pulled together, that can turn into wisdom, I think, over time, which makes you a better leader, it makes you a better people's person. So it's kind of the one leading to the other, right? How do I learn as much as I can on the way? How do I apply? How do I be sensitive to the context and the feedback, what people are telling me? And then that helps you become a better leader. That's what I think. That's a very long-winded way of answering the question. I'll keep it shorter.
No, I think it was a great answer. And I was going to jump into your experience that creates wisdom part of things, right? Because I think that that's probably around the area that I had to evolve. Like I said, I didn't come from design, marketing, and advertising. But of course, I started looking at the graphic design side of that. And I started becoming like a perfectionist of, I want to design my font and I want to draw the perfect lines and I want to do everything perfect. And then of course my expectation is that if I'm working with you, Stefan, I want that perfect. Come on. What are you doing? Why is this not exactly here? Why is this not exactly there? So I thought that being a leader was almost like, telling you these things and telling you, we want this perfection here. We want this thing there. Where's the alignment? Where's the grid? What is, very focused on the tool and the process and the aspects of things. And again, this is way in the beginning. We're talking 20 so years ago. And then the growth of that was seeing that there's a lot more space for that not perfection, right? That imperfection actually being a good thing. And then also, what is perfection? Is it Swiss design? Is it this other design, right? What are the other ways of doing things, and creating that room to breathe and to stop and go like, why am I so obsessed about that level of detail that maybe only I will notice, that maybe only I care about, right? And with time and experience, I think I develop more of that wisdom side of things to be like, I'm okay with your way of doing stuff. I'm okay with my way of doing stuff. And the best way of doing stuff is this togetherness, right? This, we have a way of doing stuff, I guess, one example of this is you talked about the podcast, you talked about your accent. And I used to say this in my podcast a lot, which is a podcast about Latino designers, right? They worry that they're speaking English to me and that they sound Latino. They're like, why am I doing this in English and not in Spanish or Portuguese? And I'm like, because that's the common English. The common English has an accent. There's more accent English. There's more international English than there is perfect English. Perfect English is small, And it's the same thing with design. It's the same idea. Perfect design, that beautiful, exact design is small, right? The beauty out there is in the gray, is in understanding all that mix, all the, the mumbo jumbo, where the languages have some dialects and you have to try to understand. And it does add flavor, right? It adds flavor to things. So it makes it more interesting having variations of things. Anyway, that's how I had to evolve. I had to be okay with things being different.
I love it. I couldn't agree with you more. And I also I want to add to that because I think that what you're saying there on the edges, on the periphery where it's a bit fuzzy and it's a bit gray and there's overlaps and ideas and systems and ways of behaving and thinking are rubbing up against each other, right? That's where the really interesting stuff happens. In the center of design where we're trying to get it perfect, it's like first of all, it will never be perfect because perfect doesn't exist. That's impossible to achieve. But that pursuit of perfection can sometimes calcify the processes and the structures and the ability to do something interesting and different because we're always doing best practice. We're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Boom, right? But once we get to the edges and you're rubbing up against something else, then there's a bit of chaos. We're on the border with chaos. And that adds something interesting to the mix. I think like, you know, historically, politically, it's the same thing. Where do we find a lot of the really interesting art and movements and music coming through? It's from places where there are different cultures rubbing up against each other.
It's
Different
not a recipe book.
100%, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not a recipe book.
Like in the beginning, you almost like you try to get everything perfect because you want to make sure it's perfect. And it's almost born of a place of being a little bit insecure about one's own ability. Certainly in my case, you know, it's like
100%.
It's a reflection on me. And if I don't get it perfect, then everyone's going to see that I'm not good enough. Yeah. And that drove, and then after a while you go, well, actually, you know what? That imperfection, the difference is what makes it unique, makes it beautiful, and that pushes you somewhere new.
But acknowledging that, right? And the reason that makes you better as a leader is you can start seeing others, right? You don't have to have that prescriptive, you know, it's only if it's in my way, in my process, in my recipe. Once you open that up, you're like, but it's also Stefan's way, and it's also Luna's way, it's also Wes, like whoever, right? You're understanding the differences and allowing for it to be more of a, it's more organic, right? There's a great book called Scale. It talks about cities and organisms and how they grow and how they're different. And companies, it's cities, organisms, companies. And most companies don't get to 100 years old. Most organisms don't get to 100 years old, but cities can be eternal. They can live for like, you know, 1,200 years, right? And I remember reading that and looking at that as the way he was describing, the way that the writer was describing, and how shocking it is that he was trying to basically give an example, a mathematical example of what we're saying here, which is, you know, there's imperfection in how the way you grow cities, right? There's chaos in the way you grow cities. They don't grow like you don't make everything always very exact, right? New York City is not an example. But most of the cities grow, you know, organically. And they keep growing and sprawling and spreading and going in areas that maybe you don't expect, right? And that's the beauty, right? Finding the beauty on that and learning that, you know, that organic growth is what you need.
100%.
Yes, I'm studying regenerative design, and one of the things he talks about is leaving the question, which is literally allowing what is emerging to emerge. It's also something that comes from Theory U. I know we don't have a lot of time with Michelle, and I really but I want to have a little bit of your perspective. I think it's important to talk about business, and design leadership program is a lot about articulating the value of design. And I want to know how you do it in your company currently, and if there is any example of like the impact that you see the design brings to the business necessarily.
You want to start that one?
Sure. I think in our case, it's a little bit different because we are a design company, right? That's what everyone does. We're a sort of design center of excellence that consults into the network. So design is our thing. I think what's interesting is that we are, in a sense, also in a position where as Digital Arts Network, we are exposing some other parts of the network to designerly ways of doing things, right? Which is more creative kind of agency world, comms, branding, etc. But it's like everything, it's a give and a take, right? It's you are listening as much as you are talking. We can articulate why design is important, and they can articulate why art direction and brand is important, right? So it's a two-way conversation. I don't feel like we need to always be articulating why the thing that we do is valuable. That to me, again, is and I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but when there is an organization or even a person that is always articulating why they are important or why what they do is important, it is actually a sign of a kind of insecurity in a way, right? I have a reason to be here. I should also be here. My voice matters. I'm important. I'm valuable. I feel like we should really be past that conversation. So if someone wants to have a conversation about that, yeah, we can certainly do that. But I don't feel that that's the primary purpose of what we should be doing. It's trying to articulate why design is important, right? If you want to learn about that, go read any business book from the last 20 years.
Right.
Off you go. They cannot.
I don't disagree with that. I think in my experience, at least in the companies that I work for, so Booking, Shopify, Atlassian, right? So these are, of course, software companies. And, the business is software. The business is developing code that you as a user are going to touch and interface with, right? And so what we had to make sure that the company understands is you're going to have 20 developers in a team. Sometimes you're going to have a lot of people building the same stuff. We have thousands of developers building, lots of features and things. We are trying to tell them why are we building, right? And how we're delivering that to the user. That's really the key difference, right? So I try to make sure my team understands that, if you're not putting your hands in the code, if you're not actually doing the coding yourself and you're not shaping the thing that the user is going to touch and interface with, you have to be able to explain to the developers the benefit of that. It doesn't have to be all the way to the business. The business knows we're here. I'm in the business, you're in the business, so that they know. So to your specific team, to the team you work with day to day, to your developers, why did we do the research? Why did we talk with the users? Why is it important to do feature A versus feature B, right? Because you can do all the features. That's great, amazing. But that's not what why did we choose this one? Well, we talk to the users, we understand them, we're trying to give them a good experience, right? And so I try to explain to them that they are the engineers, they're building this stuff, right? They're putting it out there, they're really getting the bricks in, like building this thing, but they need the architect to help them visualize how are we going to consume that space that we're in. And so if the piece of software I'm giving you is an office, right? It's an office space. That's how I describe it to my team. What you want is to have a feeling that office space was designed for you, and that when you get in, things are in the right place. You have, your shelf here, your thing here. You know exactly where things are. They just feel natural for you, and you feel at home almost in that piece of software, right? That's the conversation I have, but it's not really to the top of the company anymore, because again, we're here, right? We have a chief design officer in the company. We have a lot of designers in the company. So it's to your team level, to that group, right? Which is, if you're thinking about design leadership, I think that's the leadership part too, Luna, where it's not about, leadership to the design community in the company. Well, we have so many designers. I don't talk to all of these designers, but I do talk to a lot of the developers that are in this scope that I work in. And then I have to be able to influence and help these developers see why they're getting the stuff from me that I'm giving them. Why am I asking them to build something?
100%.
Thank you.
I wanted to add just very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I think the one other thing was that in terms of different stakeholders that I work with inside different organizations, they often have a way that they define value. So I think working, for example, with an engineering team or a dev team, there's a real case to be made for, we are going through this design process to, for example, de-risk, right? We're doing this so that we don't have to rebuild things again and again. So that we know we're building the right thing. If I'm working with sort of financial leaders, it's not a complicated calculation that you can pick it up from any sort of finance book about how to calculate customer lifetime value and, figure out some number of acquisitions and improve the return on investment for a project, right? You talk numbers and dollars to the finance department. So I think in terms of articulating the value of your project, it needs to be relevant to the specific group that you're talking to, and you need to be able to express it in a language that, relates to them.
Translating.
I think right in the beginning, that's exactly what we're saying. Michelle, I know you need to go, and we have 2 more questions. So I would love to just, have you honor your family, because I know you need to go. And so how about we just focus on this question here, because it's really something that I want to hear your opinion, which is tips and recommendations for future designers. I think a lot of people here are either transitioning or becoming a leader now. So what do you think where do you think we're going, especially with all this buzz about the design freak out, and how can we secure our value in our careers?
Right.
So please give me your opinion.
Okay. So first, don't freak out. It's hard not to freak out. Everyone freaks out. I understand that we're humans, right? As humans, we tend to freak out. The other thing is the web tends to freak out. It's not just designers, right? So Everyone's doing Web 2.0. Why am I not doing Web 2.0? How do I do this? We tend to go there. And then it's like, it's Web 3, people. We have to do blockchain. Stefan, blockchain now. Let's do it. And everyone's doing blockchain and NFTs. And now it's the metaverse. It always happens, right? There are these cycles where everyone's shouting at you about something. Your CSS is wrong. It has to be web standards. Why are you using Flash? Well, if you go back and look at articles from, 20 years ago and to now, you're always going to have something that is freaking people out. Now it's AI. Okay, it's going to happen. People are going to freak out about something. So what you have to do is you have to prepare yourself for those moments, right? Again, internally also, there's an emotional awareness of knowing that this will happen, right? Be okay with the fact that you don't have all the answers, that no one does, right? Is AI going to do this? You can't answer that. You can't know these things, right? All you can do is prepare the best way possible and try to find the things that you're passionate about. Like what we were saying, maybe there's some experience here that we have to gain from this. AI hasn't proven anything to us at this point. All that it proves is that people freak out about it and the markets love it. That's what it proved at this point, right? That's exactly what it has proven. So for me, tips or recommendations are focus on learning the practice of design and not on the tools, right? Be open to different ways of doing things. Start from there. Always be inclusive of like other ways. Step out of the bubble. Step out of the perfect Swiss design, everything's perfect world, and don't freak out, right? Freaking out doesn't help anyone. You're not going to gain anything from freaking out. You're just going to have to freak out and then stop freaking out. Right? It's just what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to, do it and then stop. So just that's my main thinking.
That's great. Step outside the bubble. I love that. It's going to put on a t-shirt. Yeah, I think absolutely. I do agree with what you're saying. We're talking about kids at the beginning of this. Before everyone joined, we're talking about our children and raising children and how they're all different. There's a great framework, very broad framework, but I find quite useful, called the Cynefin framework, right? Which is basically different modes of being, different kinds of situations that you encounter in life: simple, complicated, complex, and chaos. I think something that is complex is raising children. Every time you do it, something else happens. It's not a linear, right? It goes from A to B. I know what's going to happen. You do this thing today, you get result A. You do the thing tomorrow, you get result B. I think careers are very, very, very similar in that way. It's a complex endeavor. It's not a paint by numbers exercise, and it's not a best practice exercise. There are things that you can learn, heuristics, rules of thumb, from talking to people who've been there, but that doesn't mean that you can pick it up and just apply it to your own career. So I think, as per the Cynefin framework, there's an appropriate response for that domain, for a complex domain, is to go probe and then sense and then respond, right? So you try something out, you sense what's happening, and then you respond to that. So my advice would be to just try things, try something else, try new things, try it and fail. When you fail, you learn more than when you succeed. That's the truth of it as well. Start a podcast, write articles, talk to people, try a new career, try a side gig, try a hustle, talk to someone, start a business, fail the business. It doesn't matter. Just do things. By doing things, you meet people. By meeting people, you plug into new networks, you expose yourself to new opportunities, and something pops up that you never thought would be relevant or would be an option for you. So just try and see what happens. I think then the other things is just be a good human, just be kind to other people, just do things without expecting anything back. Just do it because it's a good thing to do. Just follow your curiosity, like we spoke before. It's kind of, your curiosity is your it's the S word again. It's your soul trying to tell you, hey, there's something interesting going on. You go and have a look at it, find out what's going on there. So do new things. There's something else which I tell my kids as well. I don't know if I should be telling it. And my wife, Carmen, says, don't tell them that. But the truth is that all the rules are made up. That's what they don't tell you at the beginning of this game of life, is that all the rules that are around us are made up. Unless you're talking about the rules of physics, potentially. Everything else is just made up. So I think it's really, really good to question, why is this thing the way that it is, and could it be different? And can I be the person that makes it a little bit different? I found that that's something, whether that's in organization, in terms of your processes, whether that's in terms of your career path, how you move from one point to another point. Whatever it is that you do, I think there's space to just do it a little bit differently. Just see if it's flexible here. Just push a little bit against that bubble and see what happens. See what the reaction is that you get.
I'll add to that one thing, Stefan. I remember this. You mentioned this thing about the soul and everything, and I remember reading this thing. I know I have to run, but just I'm gonna leave you guys with this thought. You are 85% water, right? And one of the things I read is water reacts just enough, right? So the reason we don't freak out is water reacts just enough. What does that mean? Well, if you get a small rock and you throw it at water, it doesn't jump, right? It just enough. It doesn't overreact. And I think that that's where we have to learn, to balance ourselves like water. You know, if it's a big rock, it shakes us enough, it balances itself out, right? And you're water, you know, so you have to learn to react just enough, you know.
Same.
I love
like-
this. Sorry, Stefan, I know that Michelle, you need to go. Please feel free to leave us. I will wrap up with Stefan. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for
guys.
being here.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Drive safe.
Thanks. See ya.
See you.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, that's all good. I just said, be like water, you know, it's like the Bruce Lee thing, be like water. The highest, what did he say? The highest process or the highest discipline, the highest technique is to have no technique, a little bit of everything.
That gives you malleable enough to adapt. I
Yes.
totally agree with that. And I think that's what designers are very strong in. This was it for today in terms of our conversation. I just want to wrap up by telling everyone that Design Leadership Program is going to start on September 9th. If you have any question, please reach out to me, reach out to the team. It's easy to find one of our ambassadors in the lineup on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me on LinkedIn or Juliana or anyone that works at Echoes. This is a little bit of the structure of the course, but it's much more easier to find it and understand on our website. And for those who are here today or listening to this recording, we do have a special code for 40% off. It's not for everyone, it's for those who are here today. So we have a couple of days that this is going to be valid for. Please take note of the code, or if you don't have time to take a picture now or write it down, you just need to email me. It's quite easy. I'm also going to leave my email. I think it's right here. It's easy for you to find me. And Stefan, I also want to honor your time. I just wonder if there is any final questions that anyone has, to make sure that we give voice for the community as well, because I think that's important, even though we answered to Sue, and I think she was grateful. She said thank you. Does anyone have any comment or question? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up. Know that if you want to go back into what we're saying, the recording is going to be available very soon on our YouTube, and I usually also try to send it to you via email. But rather than that, that's it. Then I want to thank you, Stefan, for your time and for the collaboration for the past 4 years. It has been amazing. I'll see you in September. And for those who are here, I hope to see you soon. We can also chit chat via email, or we can get, I don't know, a virtual coffee.
Thank you for hosting us, Luna. Really appreciate it. It was great chat with Michelle as well. Feel like
I know.
made a new friend. I'll get in touch with him for a virtual coffee.
You
Thanks
should. You guys are closer than I am from both of you.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you everyone else for joining us. If you have any questions, I'm on pretty much, I think LinkedIn is the only place where you can find me on social, but please reach out. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye now.